This morning, CEO and founder of TruePlay and AI expert Brent Dusing. Also with us, China expert and CEO Bill Walton. Gentlemen, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A lot to talk about here. First, the president is saying this morning, our president, saying he's coming home with, more than a dozen of the country's top CEOs, and they're all, it's thumbs up and positive signs. A lot of talk so far, few details. We do know that we're coming home with 200 new Boeing aircraft, a deal for soybeans that allegedly was already made and China had not followed through on. So I'm just curious your take this morning, Brent. Did the meeting really do more to stabilize the relationship than bring home the goods, or are the goods going to come later? What do you expect?
That's really hard for me to say. Bill, I think that might be something that you've followed a little more closely.
Bill, let's...
Well, yeah, I think that the thing to keep in mind here, this was a much deeper game than all the theatrics of the deal making would suggest. I mean, Donald is our favorite deal guy ever, and I was in the M&A business. He's fun to watch do this, but having all those CEOs on the plane, I think, was mainly optics, because if you followed what Xi was saying, President Xi of China, his big issue right now is Taiwan, and they are very interested in being the hegemon in the Asia Pacific region, and Taiwan is a centerpiece of that. And of course, in Brad's world, it's also the centerpiece of AI, in the sense that Taiwan Semiconductor produces all the high-end chips that is needed for that. So there's a lot going on that didn't involve selling Boeing airplanes. And I think with Donald Trump, he loves to meet people one-on-one privately. And I think this was more like the line from The Godfather, where it's you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Sure.
And given what's going on in Iran, and it's comical that China says we're not going to sell arms to Iran. Well, they already have, and there's a lot of evidence that they supplied Iran with all of its nuclear potential. So it's, and so I think Trump wanted to do a gut check with all that's going on with Hormuz and Venezuela and eventually Cuba. And, it's a big chessboard right now, and Donald has turned it upside down.
Brent, let's talk about this AI deal that allegedly was hammered out. Again, we'll see what comes to fruition. But 10 Chinese companies would potentially have access to some of our technology. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's a great idea. You showed a clip a few minutes ago about the president talking about, look, AI can do some great things, but there's also some concerns. I think we have to, as Americans, think about AI as the key question in the 21st century from a national security standpoint. And here's the issue. Right now, AI's, people say, oh, I can, create video content. I can have it create a resume for me. I can start to build agents. The problem is that AI in China, but also in America, Google's AI is being used to center the church. There's house churches in China right now that AI are silencing and censoring, and we have been at TruePlay. I run a Christian video game company. Google won't let us advertise because their AI reads Christian content as dangerous and harmful. That's essentially their policy. Yes, but they will allow Buddhist and satanic and transgender for kids content to advertise. Yes. So what the president's talking about is there are dangers with AI. If we're going to give AI more power, more authority, more decisions made about who can speak, who can receive resources publicly, then we've got to put guardrails around it to mirror American constitutional principles. We have to protect Christians from being able to speak and being able to, churches to be able to receive funds, from pastors being able to preach. And we face a real danger that this far leftist AI that Google has, that other companies have, that clearly China has, they are by definition far leftist, that can't be allowed to stand, that we have to, the thing that made America great are our values and our principles, one nation under God, and we have to protect that and put in restrictions so that AI can't destroy the church.
We appreciate you bringing that to our attention. At least our audience knows what Google is doing to you in terms of your ability to advertise. Bill, President Xi called the meetings historic, landmark, said they reached these important understandings. Again, these economic deals, we'll see if they play out and China does what they've promised. Our president has been criticized for calling President Xi a great leader. Help our audience understand, this is very much part of doing business with China. It's embedded in their culture, saving face, respect, the platitudes. It's the only way that the door opens to get trade deals done or begin to talk about trade deals. And it's a critical part of the culture that I think diplomats understand, but average residents or citizens don't.
It's entirely important in that culture to do that. What's interesting, though, is, well, Trump was lavish in his praise. Xi was not. And Xi kept bringing up the Thucydides trap, which is about the fact that when a rising power takes on an aging power, it always leads to war, or almost always does, and that he's comparing himself to the rising power. And you know, the blunt fact is, it's not clear if China is that much of a rising power with their the demographic decline and the you know, all the problems they've got with trade, and you know, their employment rate is way up, and he has issues. But Brad makes an interesting point. Let's not forget who China is. It's an extremely dark place since the Cultural Revolution. We've got forced organ harvesting going on. They've locked up people, welded them into the apartments during the COVID lockdowns. It's now pretty clear that they created the COVID virus. And what Brad's talking about with AI is just an extension of what we saw with the search engines with Google. And that's even harder to monitor. And they're already programming, or I guess they call them, Brad, what's the phrase we're using here? We're teaching our AI certain knowledge. And China's done that very effectively to steer the results of your AI searches in the direction they want you to go and to believe what you want to believe.
Yeah, the sharing of technology and information, which it really leads to my next question. You know, the president is talking about, you know, they've agreed to buy oil, the soybean deal. We're going to see if that comes, and the Boeing jet deal too. Of course, the AI. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he joined the president in Beijing. And they talked about forming a board of trade and a board of investment to oversee commerce between the two countries. Here's my question for both of you. And Bill, I'm going to start with you and come to Brent so you can fill out in the area that you're comfortable talking about in this on this question. But my concern is, we've seen in the past, you know, TikTok was a perfect example where we literally had to strip China out of that deal to continue doing, you know, that company, you know, to allow it to continue running. Because of the technology. So when we invite business people to the table on a country that we know is steeped in espionage and what their intentions are to take our country and really be dominant, does it concern you to have business people at the table doing business and giving up things that could be strategic militarily and from a security standpoint? Bill, that question's to you.
I think it's extremely naive to have the business people in the room making these decisions. Well, they're not, I'm not saying they're not loyal Americans, they are, but they also have shareholders. And it's ignoring the fact that when we first started opening up trade with China, brought them into the World Trade Organization, the belief was if we do business with them, they'll become richer and they'll become more democratic and join the world order as a useful, global citizen. That hasn't happened. And what Xi's revealed is their ultimate plan is to be the global hegemon. You don't want to be diving into trade deals with a country like that who ultimately wants to see your demise. So, yeah, I think we need to be very careful about how we let this board of trade transact.
Yeah, reason for my question.
I agree with Bill.
Go right ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. I mean, honestly, you look at TikTok, you mentioned. TikTok is essentially poisoning our youth, and Trump forced a deal, but the reality was that TikTok would show content to our kids that they wouldn't show to their own. You know, China has and that was Chinese policy, right? China protects their own children from a lot of awful, violent, you know, transgender, satanic content that people like Google and TikTok were actually promoting.
Yeah,
right.
Good point.
But they're happy to do it to our children. So I think to Bill's point, there's been a long history of spying. There's been a long history of IP being stolen. And I think now there's been a long history of harm to children using big tech. And so we've got to be super careful when we think about Chinese products, but also think about AI. Who's making the decisions? What values are those decisions based on? You don't want the far left Chinese Communist Party values, whether it's Chinese AI or Google's AI, to make decisions for our country.
Make decisions for our country, and they wouldn't even allow it in their own. Brent Dusing, great point. Bill Walton, incredible perspective. Gentlemen, wonderful conversation. Good to see you both.